This is Simon transparently awakening the heart of humanity as we see beyond the lies and open our eyes to realize
this is our time to rise.
Welcome everyone to Simon Transparently. Here I am on a beautiful morning in Portugal, and I'm with none other than a beautiful friend. And those of you who've been listening to my podcast for some time now, you will know a great respect I have for this being that's joining us again today. Let's not mess around with too many intros, but just welcome this beloved into the space. Welcome, Dar Pan.
Thank you so much, Simon. It's a pleasure to be here, as always, to share with you.
It's so good to have you back. I know we've been meandering around the world. You've been on quite a mission. Dar Pan just told me actually it was his birthday a couple of days ago. And I remember a year ago when I was celebrating his birthday, and we were just saying how fast the year's gone by. And for those who may be new and this is your first podcast and you're maybe never even heard of Dar Pan, then I really invite you to, you can pop back and maybe listen to some of our previous podcasts, but we will be picking up right now in the present moment. So don't even worry. Just drop in, take what is yours, and afterwards, as always, you will be able to explore where Dar Pan is and more of his medicine. So Dar Pan, let's just dive straight in. It's a wild time. We've spoken about this, and you've been a transmission for me for it must be nearly a decade now. And I will bring this in always because there's two specific pieces, not only your music, but specific pieces called Metamorphosis and A New Vision, which really touched my heart, as you know. I know you know this, but I'm saying this for the listeners. And I'm just listening to them daily. I mean, this morning I listened to Metamorphosis and I listened to A New Vision. I listen to Metamorphosis almost, I would say, multiple times a week. It's on my ringtone when I wake up. Metamorphosis is my ringtone. I wake up with your voice. And the reason why I'm saying this is it's still a huge anchor because it feels like we're in exactly what you've described in those transmissions. If I don't hear them, I get pulled out. So I want to I don't know if that's a good place to start, but I throw that over to you.
Well, yes, exactly. It's very hard to see the wood for the trees in the current situation because there's so much going on the planet right now on every level. So it is good, I agree, to have some sort of overview or perspective of the kind of process that we're all collectively involved in. And in Metamorphosis, of course, I give a couple of images. One is of the birthing process, and also secondly of the metamorphosis that many creatures go through in nature, i.e. caterpillar to a butterfly. But I feel that in terms of the birthing symbol or that particular metaphor, we really are at the point now. I mean, when I wrote that piece, it was like feeling that we're moving towards that, the pregnancy was there. Now peristalsis has begun. And just to explain peristalsis, it's a word that's used when a mother or a woman goes into labor and these contractions start to happen that are involuntary. Like they just start happening to preempt the child, the fetus, engaging with the birth canal. And actually what happens to the fetus is that there's this turning where the head turns and faces this impossibly tiny cervix, and peristalsis starts beginning, and this baby is being pushed inexorably towards this impossibly tiny, small little opening, which is stretching. But if you can take just for a moment, the point of view of the fetus, it must be really, really disconcerting. Because there you've been for 9 months in this kind of amniotic bliss where all your needs have been met, connection with mother, the heartbeat, you're being nourished, you're being held, you're being loved. And all of your needs are absolutely met. And so there's this kind of state of, in a good womb experience, of course, of kind of a blissful, spiritual state of no boundaries. It's an oceanic kind of experience. But when the peristalsis begins, it must be very, very upsetting for the fetus because suddenly there are forces beyond its own behest or control, pushing the fetus down towards this very small opening. And from the point of view of the fetus must think, what's happening? You know, like my environment is being disturbed, and it must think I'm dying, or death is coming, or something, the great unknown, and it's being forced out of the womb without any kind of, no one asked the fetus, are you okay about coming out to the world now? It just starts happening. And of course, the interesting thing is that if you take the point of view from the fetus, it's going through this massive change, was being pushed inexorably through the birth canal, the vaginal canal. And then, of course, when it's actually born into the world, we as parents are going, welcome to the world. Hi, you're here. What a miracle. But from the point of view of the fetus, it must be like I'm going through a death. This is like unbelievable. What's happening? I'm being ripped out of my environment, and now I'm in this really strange alien environment, i.e. 3D space-time reality. So I believe that we're kind of in that space now as we collectively are moving towards the bottleneck where peristalsis has begun. And there are forces afoot that are beyond our control as a collective, or seemingly beyond our control, and that we have no option but to surrender, just as that fetus does when it goes through the vaginal canal, through the birth canal. And there is no guarantee that everything will be okay. From the point of view of the fetus, it feels everything is being turned upside down, and it's an incredibly arduous and dangerous passage. But of course, when one views the entire birth, it's a miracle. Suddenly there with the mother is a newborn entity, this new being. And of course, the fetus, or now a baby, starts to adjust to its new environment and starts to become acclimatized and starts trusting the parents to guide it into, a successful kind of management or navigation of this new environment. And I believe we're kind of somewhere like that at the moment. We're in this peristalsis where these forces are being unleashed in the world. And as the collective, it's really hard to know where this is all going. Right. And I think that the only way to deal with this is simply what the fetus has to do. It simply has to trust, let go, and go with the process, not knowing whether it's going to die or not. And in fact, there is a kind of a death and a rebirth. And so we're very close to this death rebirth for human consciousness at the moment. And it's a very crucial point and a very, very important point. And I think it's one of the great purification of where we're releasing a lot of these energies that are no longer useful for our next sojourn, for our next phase shift as a species.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and I know we've touched on this before, and I know, like, I just as you were speaking, I was being catapulted back to one of our first talks in the beginning of what I call the pandemonium, and that whole thing with with what the world went through. And now, we're kind of, let's say, catapult rapidly, into, 2024, we're coming into, as you just said, the last year whisked by, right? We're flying, right? And you even mentioned that, the speed, with which things will start moving. And at the moment we have, as you know, we have the AI, the tech coming in. We have the wars are being thrown in our face. And of course, because of the internet and the reels and the information, and the overwhelm is intensified. And then of course there's this piece of even when people don't want to, they're not knowing how to process fully. So they're taking sides, even if they don't want to, So there's still that huge polarization happening in such an intense way. That's the best word I can use. And I'm seeing myself, and I'd love you to speak to this. I'm seeing, which you also, I'm going to keep paraphrasing some of your transmission, but we start seeing the structures and the systems in place collapse, but we see the absurdity of them, and it's not who we are, yet we somehow are still in them, using them, playing with them, kind of moving through that transition and seeing the intensity in our face. And as you've always described, not knowing, trusting the process of awakening, diving into the unknown. But then, of course, people are throwing around the kind of 3D fear of there is real violation happening, real violence happening, children, women, massacred. And that's not a new thing. I know that's been happening on our planet for eons, right? So I just love you to also bring that in, because, when I was listening to A New Vision, and of course you take us on a journey, and then there's this idea of, a new vision, a new earth, a reunification of where, crime and pain and violence becomes obsolete. And that's a wonderful, potential, right? But I know that many can't even perceive that, right? Let alone conceive it.
Absolutely. And I think it's a really necessary part of the journey is a state of absolutely not knowing. As you say, the polarization is so great at the moment. There's the polarization to either take this side or that side. And, whether you feel to take sides or not, you're somehow pushed or induced to take a position. And I think this is something really worthy of noting, because it's a very insidious thing that's happening, because this polarization is dividing people. It's separating people into this line or this camp or that camp. And it's an attempt, again, by the powers that be, by the darker forces, to try and keep people in the 3D state of like this or that, up or down, right or wrong, And this is a state that we as a species are starting to transcend. Mm. By transcending, I mean we're moving beyond the pure dualism into a state of unity consciousness, which means that when you come together and you bridge the polarity gap into a non-dual awareness, suddenly everything is seen as part of the whole. And and I think that part of this experience, as you say, rightly point out, many people cannot see where this is going. How could we possibly be going into a state of, where we live in a kind of a utopian world where there is no kind of like, violence as such, and there is no injustice or apartheid or racism. How can this be? Well, it certainly can't be within the paradigm that we've been born into, that we've been conditioned into. Certainly, I agree. Because then you could say, well, many people say, well, it's human nature. That's how it's always been. That's how it always will be. But I disagree with that. I think that's simply a function of our conditioning. And we've been conditioned to be anything less than whole. And this is one of the ways that the system as such, and I call this the system, the unholy alliance of the priests and the politicians, the state and religion, which has kept us into certain paradigms of belief that are designed to separate flesh against spirit. This religion, Muslim against Jewish or against Christian, but it's always about separation. And even as a Catholic, I was brought up as a Catholic, I was guilty just for being born. Because you were born with original sin. So that split was placed there in the very first moments that I was able to speak or understand the language and being taught the conditions of what it means to be alive on planet Earth. But one of the first things I learned about at school was original sin. Like, you're guilty. Just because of what Eve did back in the garden, you're guilty. You're carrying that guilt. So this is a really, really insidious way of control. Right. Yet using shame and guilt are the cornerstones of the Catholic empire. That's how they control the people and keep people in a state of separation and a state of antipathy against oneself. In other words, a split personage. And of course, people can be manipulated and can be made through guilt and shame to do all kinds of things that they would normally never do. Right. Once you're in that state. And I believe that what we're going through right now in this birthing we're transcending the polarity gap into an awareness that all things are connected. Like Chief Seattle once said in his beautiful treatise, that poem, where he said, everything is a web. All things are connected. What happens in one part of the web is felt indubitably on the other part of the web. Or in quantum physics, where they say when a butterfly flaps its wings, it's felt on the other side of the universe, because it's a non-local reality, if you want to use quantum terms. And I think that our awareness is coming to this place where we're starting to heal that split by accepting a paradigm which is going to unify the polarity into a whole. Now, what does that mean for us as individuals? Well, it means redefining who we are, redefining our identity, how we define ourselves. I mean, that's happening already with the whole gender polarity thing, and that's already that kind of. It's almost happening to absurd levels, and in the beginning, but it will start to even out, where people will go, well, actually, who am I? Who am I? Am I just a collection of ideas, beliefs, prejudices, likes, dislikes that I've collected since I was conscious enough to speak? Or am I something more than that? Am I this person, Dar Pan, who's, a musician, a therapist, who does all these things? Or am I something beyond that? Mm-hmm. And I would put forward the idea that we are definitely something beyond that. The ego is not a dirty word. It's just a vehicle. I don't see ego as in many spiritual traditions, they say ego is the enemy. I don't see it like that at all. I see we need an ego to navigate through 3D time space. Otherwise, we'd be just an amorphous blob. Oh, do you want to do this? I don't know. Do you like that? I don't know. We need an ego. But what is really the sickness of the ego is that we identify with it as that's who we are, rather than seeing it as a vehicle that we navigate through 3D space-time with. And thank goodness for David Bowie, who gave us, in a popular sense, the notion that you can just change characters, change realities. From Ziggy Stardust, Thin White Duke, and all of the other characters he played, he put forward into the consciousness that you can be whoever you want in terms of an egoic expression. And what's more, you can have fun with it and be as outrageous as you want, as long as you remember that you are not it. It's just a suit of clothes that you're putting on and you can take off. Mm-hmm. And you can put it back on and take it off. And I think that this notion of seeing the ego in its rightful way, that is just a vehicle for consciousness, just as our body is a vehicle for consciousness, our physical body, so is our ego. And I think that, this notion of who am I is a really good one to ask, because once we realize, okay, maybe I'm not just this collections of ideas and beliefs that have been sort of reflected back to me by my family, my peers, my workmates, my friends. If I'm not that, if that is just a construct, if that is just a creation, then who am I really? Mm. And if you inquire more deeply within with that question, and this is the very basis of Advaita, this is the heart question of Advaita, who am I? And this is Ramana Maharshi, one of the great Everests of consciousness in the 20th century, realized himself with just that question until it just dissolved, and he identified as the whole. And this is what quantum physics is bringing us to, that it's not me and the universe, that as I perceive the universe, I am not separate from it. In fact, I am the universe observing the universe. Once you strip away the egoic descriptions of our identification, of our classification as a person. So I believe that, or I feel that we're going through, part of this revolution that we're going through is not a political or a sociological or a revolution on a kind of a religious level either. It's a personal level. It's getting a finite immersion into that sense of I am connected to all things. Mm. And once you fully understand, not just intellectually, but really grok that I am connected to all things, then you could no sooner harm even a blade of grass or someone else, let alone do violence to someone else, let alone cheat, steal, lie. Who are you kidding? You're lying to yourself. You're stealing from yourself. And you learn that thing of as I give to the world, so I receive. In fact, giving is receiving. Mm. And that this is this immutable kind of process that happens. But it is all predicated upon the fact that we shift our identity from this small ego-based, skin-encapsulated sense of self to expansion to I am the whole. And not only that, but I'm a sentient part of that whole, which is aware of that part, but at the same time aware that it is the whole at the same time. It seems like a paradox, but it seems that all the great truths of our time can only be expressed in paradox.
Totally, yeah.
And so
the whole thing is,
so if everybody can get more and more people are getting that experience of like, yes, I am more than just this ego. I am actually all of life, connected to all of life. And as this realization starts to become deeply embedded in more and more people, I think once we hit critical mass, which is 12 to 15% of the population, then more and more people will start to get this on the natch as it spreads through the collective. Yeah. And I think what we'll see in future over the next few years, we're going to go deeper into the dark tunnel of the birth canal, but when we come out, it will be a very rapid, very fast extrapolation of that reality. And people will say, why didn't we see this before? It's so obvious. Mm-hmm. How can we miss this? It was because we had these blinkers on, and these blinkers are being taken away, and that can feel like very disconcerting. It can be confusing. It can be chaotic. But all transformation requires those conditions. Otherwise, transformation doesn't happen. It simply doesn't happen when things are all ordered. You know who God is. You know who your next door neighbor is. You know what's going on in the world, and you've understood it all. Very little room for transformation. Right. But when things are thrown up and shaken up, and you don't know who to trust or believe anymore, you can't trust in the priests. You can't trust in the politicians. You're kind of still going along with it, but you know it's all bullshit, Right. And you think, I better the devil, and I better be involved. But deep down, this is all bullshit. Yeah. And so this is a very disconcerting stage that we're going through collectively, but a very necessary one. Because in order for that all to be loosened up, and when it's all shaken up, voila, then there is the possibility for a large transformation of consciousness. And I think that what's happening on the world today, as you say, rightly pointed out, with the war in your face, I mean, it's always been going on, but suddenly it's on Instagram, it's on YouTube, it's everywhere you're looking. And you're seeing, babies being maimed and blood and like awful, awful suffering, horrifying suffering. And so it's being brought to the attention of people. It's the dark. We have to look at into our dark shadow of humanity, where we've been projecting outwards what Paul Levy calls the Watiko, the mind parasite, the mind virus, which is our unacknowledged, unprocessed, and sublimated aspect of our own shadow self that is being projected outwards onto something or someone else. Right. So we are in a very, very dynamic stage of the transformation of the birthing right now. Yeah. And it's dark, and it's really uncertain, and it's confusing, and it's chaotic. But this is a time when we have to look at our own darkness, literally rolling up the sleeves and going into the muck and looking at it and go, yes, this is me too. I've been denying it, or I've been unconscious of it, or I've had my head in the sand, not wanting to look at it. But now I must look at it. And I'm looking at it to bring it into the light so that I can process it and bring it home. And allow that possibility to be embraced so that we can become whole. And I think that there's no way around this. It's a time of great purification, because these dense energies that were kept in the dark basement as the shadow or as the Watiko needs to be brought into the light, and it needs to dissolve, because where we're going as a humanity and the consciousness that we're entering into, we can't take that baggage with us. We simply can't. It has to be dropped. Like in an ayahuasca session, it's like a big purge. Oh, it's a catharsis. It needs to be let go. And what we're seeing today on the planet is the beginning of a massive catharsis. It's going to get more intense. Right. It's going to get even stronger over the next couple of years. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. Let's breathe on that. I got to shut this door because there's a donkey outside. Yeah, go for it. There's a what? It's so ironic that you drop such a powerful piece of how we can transform. And the neighbors have recently they've let they have a donkey on their land, and this donkey is
I don't know what it's doing. It's just there, bless it, and it's just every now and
They
then.
make an incredible cacophony, don't they? The braying of a donkey is really something to be experienced.
And then like I could hear it getting louder. I'm not sure if the mic's picking up, but actually it's so beautiful. No, like the depth of laughter here. I mean, just that piece, no, that you just shared. If that could land for everybody, like I can see, it's so interesting. You also mentioned David Bowie. I was watching a short video of his yesterday around he's talking about life purpose, and he was also talking about how he went to his journey as an artist and his journey of expressing himself in the way that you described and not being impacted by, the empty faces of the crowd or trying to please others and so on. And he had a certain moments. He's actually deeply connected to the, let's say, the spirit of him, what you're pointing to. He was connected.
The zeitgeist. Yeah.
He was connected.
On the pulse.
Yeah. And he was
absolutely.
Yeah. And he was very aware, and he was having some interactions with some Buddhist lamas and different people along the way. And he mentioned something so beautiful that one old 70-year-old lama had said to him at some point, religion is dead, God is dead. And what he was pointing to is exactly what you speak to, is like that indoctrination, that level of conditioning, and I know Paul Levy and others point to this, is that level of conditioning that we have been bestowed upon. If people can grasp that foundation is why the very essence that kids, I saw these young kids, right, maybe 18, 19 on a train a couple of 10 days ago in Berlin, dressed in their soldier's outfit, playing a little bit, laughing, they got their gear on. And I'm like looking at them and I'm like, no child would decide to go into the war, into the army without being indoctrinated. Why would you go into creating your life, committing to something that is a fictitious enemy, that we create enemies, that's a border there, and I'm scared that you're going to take something from me, so I'm going to prepare these people to be able to fight and kill each other and give their life, which for me, it's just absurd. That is so absurd, but it's so, somebody else said, Dar Pan, you can speak to this, but how many years we go, 2000 years, whatever. This is not the norm. It just seems like the norm in our current society. Because when you say to people, no, there doesn't need to be war and army, they go, you only have your privileged life because your country fought for you. You're
Exactly.
English, you're English and you're privileged. And who are you to say, look, you're all right driving around in your car all safe, yeah? But if you didn't have your army and you didn't have your military, you'd be nothing. And I'm like, whoa there, Nelly. Yeah, less of that. Can you see the depth of that conditioning? So then people justify, let's go and kill each other. We should be killing each other. So it's become so numb that when we see it on the screen, the nervous system is just like in freeze, in numb. How do you even deal with that? I've seen it so much on movies. I'm just, another tank blowing up somebody. People dead. I've just been watching it on movies for the last 10 years. So, isn't that what we do now? Yeah, it's happening. It's happening just in the other country, across the border. Oh, well.
It's a very, very, very sad state of affairs, what you're describing. And I totally concur. I absolutely agree. And it shows how deeply astray we have gone from our true nature. It shows how the great aberration that has happened in the human psyche, where this kind of event, where these kind of conditions can prevail, and then to consider them to be normal, which is the greatest aberration of all. To think that those things like violence and segregation and humiliation and abuse can be normal or somehow passed off as being, that's just human nature. And it's a very necessary evil in order for us to be safe. This shows how deep we've gone into the unconscious realms.
Yes.
And, this is what some very big Zen sticks are going to happen and are already happening, because people need to wake up from that spell. And it literally is a spell. It's a spell that's been cast on human consciousness, just as usury and debt and money, the money system as we know it, and the separation, the violence that we take for granted, the wars that are continuous all over the planet, the racism against people. This
Genocide.
is considered to be normal, the genocide, exactly. Yeah. And then it's considered to be like justifiable.
Yeah.
You know, and this shows the depth of the sickness. It's really a psychosis.
And also, Dar Pan, it's such a psychosis, and continue. And like, I keep coming up with this vision of the people that decide this. And this is not just to condemn men, but it's male bodies. I would never believe a woman, a mother, the cosmic mother, to agree to just send in all of these kids, these divine souls, these miracles to fight. Yet the very fabric of these male bodies, when I look at them, if I look at you and I look at them and I look at others, I don't see aliveness. I don't see love in them. And I want to see love, you know, in everything, right? Because I know they're divine miracles too, but I'm like, the very fabric of their vibration is like, how are they the ones that can decide to make all this stuff to then adhere that people have to do as they're told in this prison and go and kill each other? Which is, if you meet any soldier, even in their truest form, and you sat with them when they see the birth of their child, or you sit with them and you drop into their deepest essence and say, do you really want to kill another being, another human being? I've seen it. They're like, no, but they're so brainwashed that they think that they're doing something for the country, for the people. I'm sorry, I'm just throwing this in there, but it's so like...
No, I really hear you. I really hear you, brother.
It's like,
and it's such a frustrating and such a painful thing to consider that is the case. And, you know, it's an aberration again because, you know, there was a thing called a warrior, which was a true spiritual path. It was the warrior would not be fighting out of hate or anger. It was it would be out of honing one's ability to be present, to be not in the mind, like a samurai warrior. It wasn't about hating the enemy. It was a spiritual practice where it was like you had to be really hone your alertness, your skills, your psychic, physical, spiritual alignment, and ultimately that sense of being a warrior is to master oneself. Initially, it's the enemy outside to protect, but then it becomes ultimately a path to enlightenment. Because when one is absolutely in that space of, you know, having to, if you need to defend yourself, or if you, like in the tradition of martial arts, for example, I studied Shaolin Kung Fu for many, many years. It was not about defeating the opponent. It was about mastering oneself. Mm-hmm. And ultimately you could defend yourself as well if there was an attacker. So it was more like an exercise in awareness and in presence and in impeccability. But this has been distorted into now being, you know, like subject to all kinds of like hypnosis, narratives, to create emotional charge and emotional responses in people that are, there's no other word for it, inhuman. It's actually the opposite of being human. So I think that the whole notion of being a warrior was once a very noble path to self-mastery, but it has been distorted to the point where now it's basically cannon fodder, where you send all these, as you say, young, beautiful and able-bodied men. How many young men have been killed in Ukraine? It's been hundreds of thousands.
It's insane.
But for what? For what?
For what?
And they've been sacrificed. And this is a very crucial term to consider, because it is a kind of a sacrifice. And it is a kind of a blood sacrifice. We won't go there. But it is a dark, satanic. War is satanic.
It is.
It is actually a ritual. It is a bloodletting. And there are all kinds, if you want to start looking, I don't want to go too deep into this, but you know, in my work with ayahuasca, one becomes aware of all the fourth dimensional entities, that is in the astral plane. There are literally reams of entities just supping, feasting on this kind of like bloodletting that is happening on the planet in the name of this or that, usually in the name of a god or in the name of some political persuasion. But all of it is just simply a kind of
harvesting.
It's a grimoire. It's like a spell that's being cast in which people are victims and they are feeding all these fourth dimensional entities that require this. And then, I don't want to go too deep into this because we can spend a whole podcast on this. But suffice it to say that there are motivations beyond just the political reasons and rationalizations given for war. I mean, basically, it's always economic, bottom line. But even deeper than that, it's demonic.
Yeah,
it's actually bloodletting on a scale that is. How can I say? It's a ritual. It's a ritual of death.
Right.
And that's why it's demonic. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so lovely. I want to bring in a small piece on this. We don't need to go. I love what you're bringing in though, because so I have this vision, whatever you want to call it. So, when you watch all these old movies and the one that comes up to me is Gladiator. I don't know if you saw Gladiator.
Yes. I saw it again the other day, actually.
Right.
The other day. Yeah.
Right.
I watched it.
Yeah, I watched it, I think about a year ago now, because it popped up and I was like, let me watch it. And I watched it again. And, of course, what's his name? Russell Crowe, right?
Russell.
So he's playing this character, and it's that scene that stuck out to me. It really stuck out to me, and I think it's relevant for today's talk. So he's in there. He's been trapped. He's been imprisoned. He's been taking everything away from him. He's been manipulated. His family's been killed. And now he's got to fight, even though he doesn't want to. Like what you said, he's a warrior, true warrior. He doesn't want to fight, but he gets pushed into that, right? And then he's in there in the stadium. And at one point he kills everyone and he just launches that spear up to Empire, right? Which is what they are, Empire. And he's like, are you entertained? And it's like that line just stuck with me, because the arena is just changed. The arena is Netflix. The arena is the football pitch. The arena is the tennis, the Olympic Games. The arena is the war, and it's like that energy is still playing out of just taking life force and using it for entertainment, as if like this soul, this being, as you said at the beginning, this interconnected being that has an impact on everything, is just being used for entertainment. And we're so, all I see is that we're so sucked into that entertainment that when all of a sudden war comes up, it feeds the very entity you're talking about. It feeds the pain body. It feeds the Watiko. It feeds, and then all of a sudden, everyone's got an opinion about this drama that's so juicy. Let me drink this, not knowing that the very essence where we put our focus, how we pay our attention with our life force juice, is feeding that entity, as opposed to what we're talking about, dropping back into going within, seeing our interconnection, seeing that as a delusion and going, hey, I do not acquiesce for this. That is not the drama. That is not the reality that I am projecting into the field. And that's for me the piece that is feeling like that's what I'm not seeing. In my opinion, I'm not seeing enough of that. When I come and listen to you, when I put on your transmission, when I drop into meditation, and when I feel into the vibration, I see this multi-dimension, right? I feel that we're in a completely different vibrational field. And then I'm like, okay, so is it that these beings can come out of that, or does that have to coexist, Dar Pan? And we're in a different plane. But at the same time, we're impacted by that because whatever, so-and-so gets killed, or, my friend posted yesterday, his friend in Israel got killed, a young guy, smiling face, beautiful, just killed, just dead. Yep. So, and then I will say one last piece, because, you can feel I'm triggered by this, Dar Pan. You can feel it, it's alive in me. But the one piece is, which you talk about so beautifully, is also the transcendence of death itself. So I'm also knowing that that's a part of my physical persona that is identified to how life should be.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that transmission, and thank you for your passion around it, because it's rightly so, and everything that you said, I totally resonate with, and I think that you're right about Netflix and about television and the movies, Hollywood. In fact, all of the transmission of Hollywood is basically to keep us in that divide where violence becomes almost normal, where we become hardened. We become so used to witnessing it, and the predictive programming that entails, where we're being conditioned to accept these things, even though they are the most horrible, awful, anti-humanistic kind of like actions that you could possibly ever imagine, and yet they're being presented to us as if they're totally normal, as entertainment. Are you being entertained? And this rightly may the character that Crow plays, the gladiator, say so, and rightly might we say so to the kind of like bullshit, the predictive programming that we are subjected to from places like Hollywood and Netflix, and who continue this whole notion where we are being desensitized to the most horrific, expressions of human shadow nature, as if it's entertaining, as if it's something we do and laugh about. And of course, when we are disconnected from who we truly are, when we are totally identified with this skin-encapsulated ego, this sense of, this accumulated sense of who we think we are, then of course we can be fed and controlled. As long as we don't remember who we truly are, we can identify with that and take a position as if it is normal, and then even perpetrate that, because we are the victims of it. And unless we make it conscious what is happening, we inadvertently become the perpetrators of it within our world. Exactly. And we somehow surreptitiously condone it. Like there are people who are watching what's happening in the arena of the Middle East, where there's literally genocide, slaughter, a Holocaust is occurring before our very eyes. And yet the reasons given are that never again, never a Holocaust again. Do you see the absurdity that's being played out? Yeah. Where the Watiko is saying the Holocaust was done to us, not realizing that the Holocaust is happening right now.
Right.
And thinking that it's not the same thing. It's a blind spot. It's a completely blind spot. And this is what we need to wake up from. This blind spot is our over-identification with this narrow identity of ego, which can be manipulated by the state, as the straw man, as the person who's, when you're born, you're already farmed out as a corporation. It's all part and parcel of that whole kit and caboodle that we inherit when we're born into this realm. And this is what's in the process of being transformed. This is in the process of what's being completely transcended. And the only way to transcend it is to see it fully, squarely in the eye. We need to look at it. We need to see it. We need to grok it, taste it, be horrified by it, and then realize I am also contributing to this. It's not just that person over there, this political persuasion. I have been subtly, not so subtly sometimes, condoning all of that by not saying anything, by acting as if, well, that's also what goes on, and we just condone and we acquiesce, and so on and on and on it goes. And so right now we're being presented with the sheer horror of it, as a way of waking up, of disillusioning ourselves and divesting ourselves from that, because we're suddenly being woken up by going, but there's no way. This is appalling. And even that's just putting it mildly, And so more and more and more people are seeing this. More and more people are seeing the duplicity. More and more people are seeing the double standards, the hypocrisy of countries that purport to establish democracy and human rights, meanwhile sending billions of dollars of bombs that are causing genocide onto a whole people, and then espousing democracy and freedom of human rights. Everyone's seeing the duplicity. And this is what's waking us up. This is the WD-40 that's undoing the rust of all of these rusty nuts and bolts of the ego, where we start to see things as they truly are. And sometimes it takes an unsavory immersion, i.e. a Zen stick. For those people who are not familiar with the Zen stick, it's a Zen Buddhist tradition where the master would walk up and down while the disciples were meditating. And if the master saw that the disciple had fallen asleep or something, he'd hit him over the head with a big stick. Right. And of course, some disciples would wake up and even reach enlightenment that way. Yeah. And so we need to have this Zen stick to wake us up from our somnambulism, to wake us up from the dream, to wake us up from the spell that we've been under. And this spell must be undone, not just on the level of war and violence, but on the level of usury and money and what that has represented and the distortions that they've introduced into the human collective. And these things are coming up. This is the time. And I mean, there's all kinds of things happening on every level, economically, environmentally, politically, religiously, but also on a cosmic level. We can go into the whole X-class flares that have been hitting this planet over the last several days, which are actually orchestrating this awakening also. So it's a cosmic event that takes 26,000 years. I don't know if you're familiar with the precession of the equinox.
No, it's a
26,000 year cycle that Plato called the Great Year, which means just as our Earth moves around the sun, takes a year to go around, so our whole solar system moves around a central sun in our galaxy called Alcyone, and it comes around and it takes 26,000 years to do the complete cycle. And it's also concomitant with the wobble that the Earth, which is slightly off its axis like that, it takes 26,000 years for the Earth to circumscribe this wobble. So it's a very important cosmic perambulation that we go through. It's kind of like what they call an epoch or an age or an era. As I said, the ancient Greeks called it the Great Year, and otherwise known as the precession of the equinoxes. And so this, in this precession of the equinoxes, which takes roughly 26,000 years, 25,800 to be precise, exactly halfway through, like 12 to 13,000, some big events happen to human consciousness, but also to this planet. And then when it comes to the very end of the cycle at 26,000 years, big events happen. And Osho, one of my teachers, said that at the end of the 26,000 year cycle, it also gives the possibility for a significant percentage of human consciousness to take that quantum leap into a new paradigm, into a whole new level of awareness, which is utterly discontinuous from the past. So having said that, I think that we are coming towards this end of the precessional cycle. And if you go back 12,000 years, well, that was the time of the Younger Dryas period. That was the time of the Great Flood. That was the time of the sinking of Atlantis, because we know from Plato and Pliny, who was the ancient historian in Greece, they said that Atlantis happened some 9,000 years before them. So it's about 12,000 years ago. So 12,000 years, there was a great cataclysm on this earth, which resulted in a big shift in human consciousness. And they say that there was a world civilization at that time, of which Atlantis was a part. We know it as Atlantis. But similarly now, we are coming to such a time. And everything that we're seeing on the planet, not just the human upheaval or the sociological, political, religious, environmental upheaval that we're experiencing, but also, yes, certainly the environmental. I want to focus upon that. The whole ring of fire in the volcanoes are all being activated at the moment. We're seeing earthquakes every day now. We're seeing solar flares that are X-class. We've been studying the sun for 150 years now with a telescope. It's unprecedented what is happening right now. And people put all this climate change, people like Bill Gates and others would like you to believe that it's human-induced and it's due to our fluorocarbons and fossil fuels. This is bullshit. Because if that's the case, why is Mars also warming up? The ice caps on Mars are also melting. Venus, Mercury is warming up. What's the common denominator? The sun. What's happening with the sun? It's going through massive changes, and it moves every period. I can't remember exactly how many years, but it does a polar reversal, the sun, and has an effect upon our planet. And, on our own planet, in fact, and you can look this up, but the North Pole, which was kind of based somewhere north of Canada, is moving at a rate of 80 kilometers a year towards Siberia. 80 kilometers, that's huge. They had to change the runways in Canada to accommodate this change, because suddenly the airplanes there, the instruments were telling them, oh, I should land here, but actually the airfield is there, which means that the poles are shifting. And there's another guy called Schumann, who came up with this, who measured the frequency of the Earth. And the frequency of the Earth is usually at about 7.2 hertz. Well, currently, today, the Schumann resonance is right up to 30, 40 hertz. So something is happening with our beloved Mother Earth. And, and that's what we need to pay attention to. And as Earth changes due to these solar activity, which I spoke about on our new vision, so does human activity. Human consciousness, which is linked to the electromagnetic fields of the planet. We've been dialed into 3D space reality. And if you like to use the analogy of an old radio, we've been on that channel. Now it's starting to move, and you're getting all this white noise coming in, which we're experiencing on the planet, lots of white noise, and you can still hear the channel, but it's starting to fade a bit. We're just moving into the realm where we're just going to go into white noise, and then we'll hear far off and the next channel coming in, the next dimension, and we'll start to go, oh, there is something else coming in, but we're still in the white noise. And as we get closer and closer to the birth thing, it will start to go clearly onto this new channel. And there will be a concomitant shift in the awareness of ourselves, the way we see ourselves and the way we see each other and the way we relate to our environment. And what I see it as is a big growing up. It's just growing up. It's just learning to take responsibility. As a human race, we've been shitting in our own backyard and waiting for someone else to clean it up. Maybe the generations that follow, we've been treating it with absolute, disregard, to say the least.
Disregard, yeah.
And what's happening is that we're being forced now to grow up, to take responsibility. For example, if you say to people, who here wants to be free? Everybody will put up their hand. But if you say, who here is willing to take the responsibility to be free? Many people will not. They want to keep their head in the sand. They don't want to take responsibility. They still want to be told what to do by some outside authority, by the doctors, the lawyers, the priests, the politicians. But this is changing. More and more people are starting to tune in and starting to trust themselves. When you can't trust anything out in the world anymore, where else is there to go but inside? And this is where the revolution is happening, inside of us. It's not a political or a sociological or a religious revolution. It's an inner revolution that is happening inside of every human being. And when that shows up, it will look like a collective awakening, but it'll actually be occurring in the inside of every human being. And in order for that to occur, things need to be stripped away. All the old conditioning starts to be stripped away. The dissolution of all of our power structures, of our courts, about the way we've measured things, the way we do things, the way we relate to education, the way we relate to each other, the way we relate to religion, is all in a state of change, major change. And as the dissolution happens, so the birthing is happening. It's not a sequential thing where it all has to fall apart and then go, oh, now we can start building the new. No. It's happening simultaneously.
Simultaneous. This piece, as Charles Eisenstein describes it, it's like in between stories. No, it's like the old narratives are crumbling as the new narratives are being birthed. But when we're caught in this wave of chaos and confusion, which you described again at the beginning, which gets intensified, and we have to go into that, that not knowing. Because I love when I talk to you, of course, how we get to really consider all the different elements. I mean, we're just touching on some, but just imagine like what you're saying with the planets, with the stars, with the greater effect, old civilizations, I don't know how many billions of years the so-called planets have been here. And of course, we're just experiencing this, this moment, this little blip, right? You and I will exist for a blip of time, while at the same time, that blip, that sense of insignificance that I am, as it's expanded into the interconnectedness, I know exactly what you're saying, how, for example, on a personal level, the last 2 years I've been in a relationship, and just through a number of rituals and some therapy and noticing, I noticed that the last 2 years, very much against what I know and embody and believe, I've been playing out some shadow aspect of my father's lineage and my mother's lineage, where, you know, there's been lack and scarcity, and my fear of really permitting to love, the fear of really giving myself was actually showing up in very subtle, right? Not like extreme abuse, but I would call it abuse, because the way that I was showing up was quite subtly dismissive, right? So I caught this shadow of myself, which was linked to how my father used to show up, even though I didn't meet him and know him, but know him through, you know, some of my mum's stories and so on. Yeah. Not to judge him and condemn him, but on a real kind of, you know, personal level, that's playing out. And I love what you said earlier. Well, if I don't catch that and look at that and bring that into awareness, you know, how is that any different than, you know, whatever, the politician that's being deceitful and deceiving and playing out his piece where he doesn't want to declare, you know, it's like, that's the piece that I'm taking from what you're saying today, that sharpening, like, I want to project out there, like, you know, they should do this, we should do this, but actually, how am I showing up? You know, how am I look at myself? And I guess, I'd love you to speak to this, Dar Pan, because people listening, they might, when we give them the big picture and we see the velocity of it, it's like, it can seem that we're helpless and powerless and incapacitated in some level. Whereas actually, when we bring it back to ourselves, there is a power that we have, right? We have access to the power of transformation and the radical shift in consciousness that you say. If we can tap into that, then actually our actions, our words, our thoughts, you know, where we project our focus is actually contributing to the war over there, or the violence over there, or, you know, the thing that we don't want to see.
100%. Thank you, firstly, for your transparency and honesty. Excuse the pun, and for you know, because that is exactly the arena in which we can have power, where we become empowered, which is to have that sort of like self-awareness of, because things are rapidly changing and because things are coming up in our faces so quickly now, whereas before we could have gone unconscious on something or just not wanted to see something. More and more now, it's getting more and more difficult not to see it. And the arena of change is happening inside of ourselves. So noticing those things, and I can totally relate to that. That's exactly what I've found in my relationship too, is becoming aware and cognizant of the depth of our conditioning by our parents, by the way we've been taught, but to conduct relationships, the kind of like polarization that we've experienced as the way to conduct a relationship or conduct ourselves in the world. All of this has to come up for review now. It's really, really, I spent last year actually in a big stock taking, like an inventory. I was looking, because I was going through a lot of Pluto transits and I was very quiet for a couple of years, and I just went into my man cave here basically and hardly saw anybody for a couple of months, where I just went through everything, all my relationships, all my connections, all my beliefs, when I was just saying, is this useful? Yeah, it's still useful. Okay, keep that. What about this? Nah, that's patently past its use by date. So consciously in the waste paper basket. What about this? I'm just weeded out all of those parts of myself where I'm still unconscious and where I'm still not fully aware of the impact I'm having upon others, you know. And I did an Iboga session a couple of years ago, and the greatest learning I got from that was that I got to experience a lot of my relationships in this lifetime, but not from the point of view of me, but from the point of view of the other. So I was seeing the impact I was having upon the other, and I was experiencing it as the other, which was an incredibly sobering and eye-opening exercise. Wow. Let me tell you, it was really, really deep. It was hard to face.
Say that again. So you was, this ceremony, you were getting to see yourself as, go on, give me
as the other, so that all of the important relationships in my life, and the impact I had upon them, me thinking that I'm having one kind of an impact, but then being in the other person's shoes, experiencing it from their point of view, experiencing me onto them and going, oh my God, I didn't realize I had that impact, or I didn't mean that, or, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I was totally unaware. It was really sobering, let me tell you. And it was an incredibly powerful immersion and an incredibly powerful lesson. And so since that time, I've tried to be aware, consciously now, of my impact upon others, and to be more aware of the way I am. So often one can think that one's in the right or doing something, or not even particularly thinking too much about something, and yet being unaware of the impact upon another being. And so this is where we need to start looking, is at our conditioning. I see that the heart of all of this is undoing the conditioning that we've been taught. And a lot of that conditioning is about separation. A lot of that conditioning, as I mentioned earlier, is about, polarization. And we're I think that a really, really important practice as we move through this birthing canal, in becoming more aware, something we can actually practice ourselves, is to practice dominion over our own self. And that is, I call it self-inquiry. So when something happens, I ask myself, where am I coming from in this? What is my real motivation here? And if I'm being hurt by somebody, or I feel upset, or I feel, abandoned or rejected, I go back in myself and I inquire, why am I so upset? Why am I so angry? Why am I so frustrated? Why am I so anxious? And I find that by going deeper down and finding the tap root, where that actually originated from, by inquiring deeper and deeper. Oh, yeah, it's because, first of all, you think, it's because this person did this, that's why I'm feeling like that, it's their fault, but when you inquire more deeply, you realize, oh my God, well, they did that, but my reaction was my reaction. I have to own that. If that was anger or fear or anxiety or any number of different emotional reactions, that's me. That person didn't give me that. I need to take responsibility for that. I'm now speaking stuff that I know that you're fully aware of, and most of our listeners, but I'm just bringing it up because I think it's a really important way to navigate these times, is to look within, is to look at where these roots come down to, the root belief system, the core belief that is holding these locked up emotions in place in our cellular memory, that is triggered, the pain body, that is triggered by another person saying something, doing something that may be innocuous from their point of view, but really triggers something in me, And this was what I meant about, when you see it from the other person's point of view, you really become aware of the immensity of the difference. What you intend and what is actually received is often massive. And so to become more and more aware of that, and to start to become aware of the interconnectedness of all human beings, and how we all, like language is a very inadequate way of communication sometimes, because what is said is often, and meant is often, not as what is heard or received. And hence the human condition, hence the kind of misunderstandings that we're experiencing on the planet today. And so we need to go deeper into who we truly are, deeper into our authenticity, and really practice these very basic things. They may seem very simple and kind of like not mean that much, but in fact, tweaking the inner software of our own being is far more powerful than tinkering with the nuts and bolts of the social system.
No, they're huge. Powerful. They're huge.
As we change our perception, so the world outside changes.
Yeah.
Again, coming back to the quantum non-local theory, that we are not separate from that which we observe. We are what we observe. And taking that notion, the idea that, that we can actually navigate these times and have these tools that are very available to each and every one of us. That, yes, it's sometimes when you extrapolate to the big picture, you think, well, what can I do? I'm so helpless. What can I practically do?
Yeah.
And I think these things of becoming just simple awareness and simple ways of becoming aware of ourselves, because let's face it, we started this program by saying that the time is accelerated, that a year has just gone past like that. Well, let me just flesh that out a little bit. Back when I was younger, I'm an ancient person, 70, but back when I was a kid, you had a thought, and then perhaps you experienced the manifestation of the thought sometime afterwards, but you never put the two together, what you were experiencing and the thought that preceded it. But when you really look at it, a thought always precedes a manifestation of a reality. If you're going to build a house, for example, you need to talk to an architect, get the plans together, get some builders happening, and in time, the house manifests. And we are aware of that process. We call it planning, foreplanning, and working. But what most people are unaware of is that their own internal dialogue which is pretty much constant in most people, is constantly programming us denoting what our reality is, what our current reality is. And let's face it, the more unconscious we are of our thoughts, the more we're just playing reruns all the time. You think, why is this happening to me all the time? Why am I always in this situation? Why doesn't that, and it's just because we're running this internal dialogue, which we're largely unaware of. And so it used to be that the thought, there would be a large amount of time, and then the manifestation of the thought would happen. We didn't put the two together. But now, as time is accelerating, this gap between the thought and the manifestation of the thought is, as the veils are getting lifted, is getting less and less and less. So people are being forced to realize, oh my God, I was just thinking about this yesterday, and now it's happening. God, maybe there's a connection between what I was thinking, feeling, dreaming, and now I'm experiencing. Maybe there's a connection. And you say, why is all this shit happening to me? You start thinking, fuck, there's fear in my mind. There's jealousy. There's all these, negative thoughts and emotions happening. And I'm experiencing them. So maybe I'm creating them. And so the penny is starting to drop with a lot of people as this accelerating bottleneck, as we approach the bottleneck. And I've always seen it as an ascending spiral. So it goes, whoa, 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 whoa. And we're about to enter into the bit. It's going to happen so fast. And I think it was Terence McKenna who said that, novelty, which is the introduction of all new variables into the equation, is just going to go through the roof. And one wonders, in fact, if the rate of change will exceed the rate of human adaptability. I mean, it's a fair point to consider. But I believe personally that as the rate of change increases to an almost infernal intensity, we will be leapt. The consciousness will not be able to cope, and it'll just go boof and open up into outside of the mental compartmental mind that we've been living in up until now, into something else. And that something else will be the birthing into this new awareness, into this new way of relating, to this new way of seeing ourselves, of this new identity, as we start to allow a much larger sense of itself. Call it your higher self if you want. Call it God if you really feel to do it. Call it the unified field of consciousness. I don't care what you call it, but that's what it is. It's an expanded higher sense of self, which when we make that shift from this little ego encapsulated sense of self into that unified field, a whole shift happens. Yeah. And that doesn't mean we lose the little ego encapsulated sense of self, because the higher always includes the lower. And so we'll still be able to have this sense of Dar Pan or Simon, but there won't be an attachment to it, because there'll be an awareness that we are something so much more vast, beautiful, so much more amazing, so much more miraculous. Whereas when we're in the lower part, the lower aspect, the little ego, is often exclusive of that higher awareness of the higher self, of the unified field. But the higher is always inclusive of the lower. Right. And so this is how I feel the shift is happening. So we need to be attentive to our own process with a renewed vigor, with a renewed awareness, with a renewed commitment to really look and to grow in our awareness. It's not that we even have to do too much, because it's not a doing as in oh, let's just tinker with this nuts and bolt and change this and become a better version of me. No, it includes that, but it's not just that. It is an awareness shift. It is literally shifting the paradigm, shifting the perspective. And so the larger can contain the lower, but that the larger becomes the main source from which we gain energy.
Right.
So we shift the source from the personal self to the transpersonal self, the unified field, which includes the personal self.
Right. And because we're having that heightened awareness, let's just use that term, we're also seeing something's coming up lovely. There's a couple of things popping I want to ask you, but there's something, what you're saying there, which is beautiful. When we can welcome that in, what you just described, and start to embody that, not just as a concept, but as a lived experience, then what happens, and this, because sometimes what I do is I can see like, I see everyone competing and judging and kind of this kind of same, even in the spiritual self-development worlds, the so-called evolutionary perspective worlds, I kind of see like, we seem to be all like doing our little thing, working in our little compart. But the way you describe it, we start to see that, it's not just me, we're all working in this same vibrational field, and that is consciousness kind of doing us. And when I can tap into that and see that, then I know that when you're doing your ceremony over in Australia, I know that I'm part of that. That's a culture. When I listen to your music or other musicians, I know we're part of this same unified field. And Indeed. At the same time, sometimes I look out there and I see all the marketing and the selling and the kind of manipulation. And I'm like, are we really unified and working together here? Are we all working towards this new vision? How can we see this collective coherence? Like you've described many beings in the past, and, you've been on whatever documentaries, podcasts, talks. And I do get a sense that there is this kind of unity consciousness, unified field. And I want to point out that I see also some distortion with that, where we're not really aligned to this, like, are we cultivating this new vision together? Or are we, my way is doing it or my way is doing it? That's kind of playing out a little. I'm going to just throw you a seed on this piece because we just spoke up. So I want you to drop in around the unified field, the unity, this new vision that you speak of. And as you were talking so beautifully, what also popped up is that when we talk of this greater awareness, there's also a piece that I really wanted to ask, as just what was coming up as you were speaking, as I was hearing feminine, divine feminine, this whole piece around this distortion, also around the lack of, in my opinion, the integration of the wisdom of the feminine, of the female, that I always look at our society, and I look at the people in power, and even the women that sometimes become in power, I'm like, no, they don't look masculine. They're kind of masculinized, right? And then at the moment, because we're in this year of the politics again, right, coming up, and everybody's kind of going, yeah, let's get this man in power. At the moment, it's like whatever his name is, JFK or whatever it is, Junior, and like, let's get this man in power. I'm like, no, let's not get these men in power. This is just another version of the same thing. Maybe let's have I love you so much, but let's have Dar Pan in power, or let's have a woman in power. Let's have a woman in power. I know you don't want that, but you know what I mean? Like, let's have a woman. And actually, then I want you to speak to this, because what you're saying is, no, don't, in your new vision, or how I perceive it, let's not even have anyone being with all that stress and having to deal with all of that power. I want you to talk to that. That unified field feels like we're all in that, like you described here, self-aware, full responsibility. How are we bringing in the as permaculture would describe it, the collective organism that is actually in power? But anyway, riff on that for me, brother.
Thank you. That's a very fertile topic. Yeah, thanks. Well, just to address the unified field issue, I think that this is something I talk about that is felt by certain percentage of human beings, albeit a very small one on the planet right now, but is the precursor of a general collective awareness. As I said, use the metaphor of the radio before, we're entering into the white noise. We're not hearing that unified field yet. That is not yet part of our awareness. What has to happen first is this is this, we're in a hall of mirrors. You've probably heard me use this,
I love
this
it.
metaphor before. But what we're seeing are a lot of distorted reflections, far be it from a unified field. We're experiencing distorted reflections. But it's very, very important for us to grok and to know and to look at those full frontal distortions in order to work out whatever karma we still have around those distortions. And, you know, I see the whole political system that you've just referred to as a gross distortion of the representation of human beings. And because we are a unified field, and, you know, having politicians like the ones you referred to me, I call all of that the circus. It's the circus. It's the one that's like the puppet show, you know, Punch and Judy, you know, Trump, Biden, RFK, whatever. It's there as entertainment. It's not actually there representing anything, let alone the will of the people. Far from it.
Right.
It's entertainment, like the gladiator said. And that's what it is. Let's be really clear and call a spade a spade. But as I said earlier, because everything's been shaken up and people don't know what to believe anymore, people don't know who to believe, what to do, people will still find themselves following a politician, even though they know politicians lie, politicians take graft, politicians are just self-serving, they're interested in their career, they can be bought by whoever's more powerful than they are, but still...
Yeah, there's strings behind.
What else are we going to do? What else? And this is the helplessness that most people feel. And this is where we've got to sever the cord. And of course, severing the cord is a very painful thing, because once you're conditioned or under the spell of thinking that this is the way things are, the idea that you're going to kind of jettison that brings up fear, because you go, well, if I do that and I don't actually vote, or I don't actually believe in this anymore, or I refuse to comply or to acquiesce to that any longer, then what takes its place? Am I just standing at the abyss?
Right.
Am I just going to fall into this bottomless pit?
Right.
You know, maybe I should trust the devil I know, you know. And this is a cognitive dissonance that people are experiencing en masse at this present time.
Right.
Of course, there are people who can see the bigger picture. And this is what we're doing on this podcast, is to open up, to unwrap, to extrapolate beyond this cognitive dissonance and this where we can't see the wood for the trees, to get some sort of inkling or some sort of lay of the land, a map, if you like, that we can use to navigate. But when people ask me, well, what's the answer? I don't know what the answer is, because the whole point is we're entering into the unknown. How can you know the unknown? If we knew what the unknown was, we wouldn't be in this state. We have to accept the unknown. And this is where we're at. We're facing the unknown. We're standing at the abyss. But you know what? When you really look at it, when you strip away all of the political structures and the religious structures and all the things that we thought were real, we were always standing at the abyss.
Right.
We've always been standing at the abyss. We just had all these things in place that gave us the impression that things were solid, things were real, things were okay, right, and there was a continuity and so on and so forth.
Right.
But really, that was only between the Second World War and now. There did appear to be some sort of continuity or some sort of thing that you could trust and rely upon. But now we're being shown that that was all an illusion as we go through the disillusioning process that we're in right now. And part of that disillusioning process is being okay with not knowing. This is what I call the wisdom of insecurity, where one simply has to embrace the unknown and accept it as part of our reality. Accept it as that we are in fact that we are not separate from, that we are carving the pathways as we step by step. As we take each step, we are literally cutting the new pathways. There is no path that we're following. There is none. We are creating it. But as we can learn to trust ourselves and not outer authority, first we relinquish and pull away all of our kind of like dependence, our addictive dependence upon outside authority, and start to trust more and more what is deeply felt within.
Right.
And this is something that we share with every human being. It's called intuition. It's our lifeline. It's our bloodline into the unified field. The conscious mind, the rational left brain, is there, and that's what we've always thought was real, dependable. Science, materialism is based upon that kind of notion. But what we're entering into now is more a right brain, holographic, intuitive part of the journey that we need to embrace as much as we embrace the rational part of ourselves. So it's kind of like a bridging of our hemispheres, if you like, the right and the left. It's also being reflected on the planet of the bridging between Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy. It's also reflecting the fact that science, which has been materially based, upon our physics, which is Newtonian up until quantum physics, was just saying that, consciousness doesn't exist because we can't smell it, taste it, we can't measure it, we can't see it, therefore it doesn't really exist. But now we're having to admit that perhaps all the great mystics that have ever lived, perhaps all the great gurus and teachers and philosophers, that they've been speaking about this inner knowing, that they've been speaking about this sense of self, which is beyond our rational extrapolation or rational, reducing it to a kind of an object, and going into this idea of, if consciousness does exist, then perhaps mysticism and science, which heretofore have traveled parallel paths, are actually converging. And wow, what an amazing idea to think about, because perhaps in that very convergence of science and spirituality is the very paradigm, is the very key to explaining or giving some sort of map that we're entering into as we birth into the unified field of consciousness. And again, it brings me to another great book of Paul Levy, which is called The Quantum Revelation. And it's subtitled The Radical Synthesis of Science and Spirituality. I recommend this book to anybody who has the capacity to go on that journey, because it will flesh out so many of the unknowns. It still remains an unknown, but it's a kind of a known unknown rather than, an abyss. And I think that that's a really wonderful thing. I think Paul Levy's done a great service in bringing this together, because it is literally what's happening inside of us. The unified field is not out there. It is who we truly are at our essence. It is pure consciousness. And pure consciousness is non-local. It's like, if you can imagine, if you want to take the idea of the Big Bang, where it's just all of existence, all of the universe was just brought into this pinprick of really dense matter, which one day exploded outwards. And it's still expanding as we speak, billions of years later. Well, once when it was all that impossibly tiny speck of very heavy gravity that exploded into what we now know to be the known universe, was once that tiny thing is obviously still connected. Yeah. It was that tiny thing which is expanding, which is non-local.
Yeah.
So every part of the universe is connected to any other part, and we are not separate from that. Our affliction up until now has been to think that through our ego, we look at the world and we know this is us. And inherent to that is a separation. Oh, right. There's the world. Here am I. I can manipulate the world to my own intent, or to my own profit, or to my own, design, and keep this notion of that I'm separate from nature, or that I'm separate from the universe.
Right.
But that gap is closing. That is being completely dissolved. It's in major dissolution. Existence has withdrawn all support for that kind of a notion, that kind of a paradigm. And what it's now doing is giving support to, and this is to do with the precession of the equinoxes coming around about 26,000 years. It's a cosmic cycle in which this is always meant to happen. It's an awakening into a whole new way of seeing,
right,
of perception,
right,
a whole new awareness. Things will remain the same in the world. There'll still be gravity and there'll still be other people, but our whole way of perceiving that, our whole way of being aware of that and what it means, is going through a radical shift.
Yeah. Well, it's like
the shift is internal. It's in consciousness.
Yeah. And it's what you say when you say in your transmission around, it will be unrecognizable by most of us today. That's what you're talking about, not in these many pieces, because what you're describing is when you see also when you see everything as conscious, right, as well, meaning that the books are conscious, the sideboard is conscious, table is conscious, everything is a vibration, everything is alive, everything has a consciousness, right? That's another piece. So like you said, it might seem that everything stays the same based on how you had a perception in the past or whatever at some point in your now moment, but now you're seeing, and this change. I mean, psilocybin mushrooms has helped me to reconnect to this awareness of like everything is conscious, everything is alive. And I know that you've worked with. I know you don't so much anymore, but I know your depth of experience has worked with many of the plant medicines and even LSD and many psychedelics in the early stages. And that's something I never did. But in the last two and a half years, I've welcomed in the psilocybin mushroom as a way of noticing what it's done to my meditation and to my perception has really kind of, let's just say, high definitioned a different perception for me.
Yes,
right? So that is, I don't know if that's touching on what you're pointing through, but I love what
it does indeed.
I love what you said about the unified field is already there, right? It's like whether you go out there and you're ignorant and you're unconscious and you're an abuser or not, you're there. It's there anyway.
Indeed, it's already in place. It's just that we're just opening up to the awareness of it and to the beingness of it, because inherent in our very description of ourselves as a species, we call ourselves human beings. Right. But up until now, one could argue that we've been actually human doings. We've been doing our life and doing it in separation, doing it in a very compartmentalized, ego-encapsulated reality map, which is in its dissolution. Yeah. There's no other way to put it. And one could look at the world and go, no, it's not in dissolution. Look at it. It's very height of its raging glory. Well, yes, it is. But that's always what happens before the actual shift happens. It's like the darkest hour is before the dawn. The most heightened of all of that separation is what we're experiencing right now on the planet before it actually shifts and the dawn comes and the light is reintroduced into the story. And so I think you're quite right in pointing out that it is already in place. It's just that we as human beings are starting to become cognizant of that, starting to become aware of that. And it is a mutation. It's not just a transformation, it is a metamorphosis in consciousness. Yes. And all we need to do is trust, let go and let this thing happen. It's like, the Hopi one had this beautiful saying where they say, the river is running very fast and at this times, in these times. And that one has to be careful not to cling to the bank or to swim against the stream. But just be aware, keep your head above the water and let the river take you, because the river will take you surely to the ocean. It will take you home. But we don't know how. It's just you have to trust and let that happen. For me, this icing on the cake, as I see it, in human consciousness, existence or nature has done this many times before, where it's spent thousands of years creating the pretext for human beings to come to this point. And not just for human beings, but all of the living sentient beings, to come to the point where the icing is now being put on the cake, where self-realization, self-actualization is a possibility on a collective level. Not everyone is going to make this shift. And I think that those who are not ready for it will be taken, if you believe in reincarnation, to another karmic education school, another 3D space-time reality, another simulation, if you like, where people can continue their work in this realm. But for those who are ready to make this leap, to make this shift, this quantum leap, this is a very special time. It only happens every 26,000 years, this possibility for a significant proportion of human consciousness to make this shift of perception into an evolutionary leap, into a whole new way of perceiving ourselves and our world and each other.
Yeah, it's like what you said earlier. It's a whole new epoch, right? It's that word epoch.
Yes,
it's a whole new piece. And I want us. I know we're rolling. Thank you so much. I love it, and I'm feeling a lot more spacious already in my being. I can just feel a lot more ease and peace arising. The week or so, I've definitely felt, just a sense of maybe entanglement into some of the more denser vibrations and frequencies that have been presented to me in different forms, and kind of feeling the density, coming in. And I think this is nice to kind of, bring ourselves into a closing of today's podcast, because I always love, as you know, to bring it down to, for those listening as well, how they, and you've given them many options already, but just how they can, we can weave this into, to living it and breathing it on a real practical level. And the piece I want to bring in now is, I was listening to a podcast and Marianne Williamson was talking about, because she's been going for presidency and for some years now, and she was going again, and she was talking about how as a woman, she was not getting welcomed onto some of the different platforms, and she wasn't getting welcomed into certain spaces to actually have a voice, right? So there's this idea of, do we have a voice? And you said earlier, speak your truth. And I bring in this piece around the wisdom of the womb wisdom, the wisdom of the female bodied being, the
divine feminine.
The divine feminine, this kind of wisdom keepers. And the piece that also I want to bring in, just for those listening. And yeah, you said earlier, actually, just before I jump into that, you said earlier, I know this and you know this, and you're repeating stuff. But for me, Dar Pan, the repetition of some of these pieces that you've shared today is vital, because the subconscious program is steeped in repetition of the unconscious, repetition of the ignorant, repetition of the habits that don't expand us. So the more that we hear it, the more we get another reference point for the subconscious to go, this is how it can be. So I just want to acknowledge you for that. It's something I didn't say earlier. And then this piece around, I love what you said again about the puppet show of like, so Marianne Williams said, the spiritual people, the people that are supposedly more conscious and awake, they should get into politics, and we should create new politics, and we should create it's not going to crumble from the outside. It's got to crumble, we've got to change it. And then what I wanted to speak to is that you living in community, us coming together in ways of permaculture, living off the land, reconnecting to the wisdom that you've shared today, and actually birthing new villages and so on. That's for me a political act, because that's where we're going back to actually how we can live in harmony with each other and so on. I don't know if there's something you want to speak to that, because I feel sometimes there's this like, the political system, the system is so strong and we're so governed by it, and all of our system is kind of stemmed from it. How can we birth these new villages? Well, how can we take care of the new ways of health and still being looked after if we break our leg and we want to be taken to a hospital, right? It's like these things that want to kind of practically come into existence. I don't know if there's something, just a few words we can kind of bring into that.
Absolutely. No, because who was this woman, Marianne Williamson?
Marianne Williamson she's kind of, she's a spiritual teacher. She wrote a number of books around love. She works with the, what's it called? There's a whole book called, you would know it. You know this book.
It doesn't matter.
Anyway.
I just wanted to identify who she was.
Yeah.
Look, I can understand her frustration. I can understand why she's saying, look, awake people should be politically doing something, should get active. But look, there was a period in my life when I totally agreed with that. I was, got to remember, I grew up in the 70s. I was at university. You're seeing all these university demonstrations now about the whole thing in Gaza.
Yeah.
But when I was younger and I was in my early 20s, there was Vietnam, there was apartheid, and we were very active as students. In fact, I have about 5 political convictions to my name from that time, from being very active. I believed in political activity. I believed in political activism, and that it was one's innate responsibility to do something about that. But I've since changed my view because, look, I can understand her frustration. And if that's the only model you've got to work with, of course, you would do that. But I found that after, banging my head against the wall of the establishment when I was a student for 5 or 6 years, all I ended up getting was a big headache.
Right.
Actually, there were incremental changes. Yes, we did bring the troops home. The walls of apartheid did come down in some countries, at least in Africa. Still very alive in other parts of the world, right. At least. But and there were incremental changes. But, those heads of state were changed by new heads of state who then were also became susceptible to corruption, and we got more of the same. And the revolutionaries ended up becoming the reactionaries, and so on and so forth. And there's endless cycle. And that's when I discovered meditation, and I realized, wow, it's so much more powerful to change your perception of the world. And that's something we do have power over. Yes. We have dominion over ourselves. I don't have power over what Bush or what, Trump or Biden does or doesn't do. Very little. But I do have dominion over myself, and how I can change myself. As I change my perception, the whole world changes to accommodate my new perception of reality. And this is something each of us as a human being holds as magical wand, that we actually create our reality. And yet 90% of the planet, probably more, 99% of the planet are still largely unaware of that fact. And what's happening is we're becoming more and more being forced to grow up and to take our rightful place as conscious custodians of this incredibly beautiful blue planet in the far-flung reaches of the Milky Way, instead of shitting in the backyard, starting to take care of it. And how does that happen? By realizing that we have the power to do so. By realizing that we are part of the unified field of consciousness. By realizing that what I think, act, and do is reflected in my world in the physical realm. It's part of the laws of the simulation that we exist in, that what I think, feel, and act upon is what starts to manifest in the world. But if we think that we're just some poor little person here, not having any real power, that all our power has been taken away and it's exerted upon us by other faceless beings who are exerting power over us and telling us what to do, this, of course, is psychic annihilation. It not only diminishes, it extinguishes our God-given, I don't like using that word, our innate creative ability to manifest reality. And I could do a whole podcast just on that. And let's do one on that, because this is a way that people can really, truly start to take the reins of their own life and start to make a difference and start to make a real difference in the world. And this is by taking responsibility. And this is the growing up period, that we actually need to take responsibility who we are as conscious creators, not just reactors to what's going on in the world, reacting blindly, helplessly to things outside of us that we seem to have no control over, and start to realize that we are born with this innate creative ability to manifest our reality. And I know that might be hard for some people who are hearing this to believe or to really get a handle on, because they go, yeah, but I don't have any money and I don't have anything, and I'm in a war zone. I didn't fucking manifest that. And I can understand. But the thing is, it is all happening as a result of a collective dreaming. If you want to go back far enough, whether it's, say, looking at the Israeli, Palestinian situation, there's been the whole ongoing thing of victim and perpetrator that's going on incessantly. Right. And I mean, what was done to the Jews by the Nazis is now being perpetrated upon the Palestinians. Right. Why is that happening? It's happening because there's been no forgiveness. That endless cycle of victim and perpetrator is unconsciously going on and on and on. The only thing that can cut that cycle is forgiveness. And I don't see a whole lot of that around. And so it will go on and becoming more and more intense. And this is an abrogation of our innate ability to co-create reality.
Yeah,
So-
beautiful. And no, I just want to say that it's so beautiful you bring that in, because it's kind of full circle on some level. If we go back to everything we've just, shared, you've just shared, we've shared, and you beautiful beings listening have listened to, what Dar Pan's saying again is like, let's hone that in. And not only will we do a podcast on it, I really think it's time we do a journey with a group of beings. I told you this before, Dar Pan, and I'm voicing it now because I want to manifest it in, because I feel that this piece is really huge. If whether we call it what's going on in the world right now, as you said, the apartheid, the Vietnam War, the bloody, we can go back. People say that slavery is over. I see slavery everywhere still. So let's, racism.
Economic slavery everywhere.
Yeah, people say racism. We're not racist anymore. I'm sorry. Majority of people are still racist, right?
That's right. Absolutely.
So let's just let's be real with that. And you don't even want to let in some bloody so-called immigrants across the fucking border.
That's right.
And then when they come along, you're like, they're taking all our jobs. Fucking hell. Excuse me.
Absolutely.
Let's not make out. Yeah, we're superior. We're not racist anymore. Well, if you're not racist anymore, really check in. Would you swap your life right now for a fellow brother who's black? Because
one only needs to scratch the surface to reveal this reality.
Right. And also, how do you actually treat yourself when you walk into a space where there's a black being? Right. And I grew up with a number of black, brothers and they used to say to me, "Sai, call me black. Don't call me half caste. Don't call me anything, just tell me how it is." And then what they'd also say is the way that they're treated when me and them would walk into a place, and the way they were looked at and the way I was looked at was very bloody different. And I was not aware of that. Right?
No.
I was just thinking that I'm being treated the same as anybody else. No, we're not. Right? And if you think about it, I could tune in myself right now and say, when I walk down the road, and I grew up in an environment where, we were the hoodies, we were the criminals, we were the rogues, we were the so-called tyrants, right? Well, I still notice how I respond when I walk into a certain area and there's certain people hanging out and there's some youth and they're young and they've got their hoodies on and so on. I notice how I still respond, and I was kind of them, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
there is, point. Yeah. But I want to just throw that in there, and I want to skip that on now. There's just a topic that what Dar Pan's pointed out for us and what you have pointed out for us, brother, is that level of cyclical replication is still happening, and if we don't see that just showing up in a different way, then we're also just playing along with the ignorance. And what you're pointing to is, let's pull ourselves out of that and really look at how we can cultivate a whole new way of engaging,
and to take responsibility that is happening in the world because it is also in me. And when I take full responsibility for the killer and the murderer and the racist inside of me, then I'm contributing in an incredibly powerful way to peace and justice actually manifesting on the world. It means cleaning up your own backyard. It's not about pointing the finger and going, look at that, look what they're doing, and they're doing the same thing as what was done to them. It's about going, my goodness, I need to own up to my shadow. I need to own up. As you said, you found yourself in your last relationship behaving in ways that were not really congruent with the way that you want to behave, because there were elements of your paternal conditioning or, other genetic conditioning or whatever it is coming in. And to become aware of that already shines a light into the darkness. It's allowing transparency, honesty, and presence to shine the light onto these unconscious kind of notions and ideas and belief systems that we carry with us unquestioningly, because we've been conditioned in that way. In other words, the conditioning has to be fully looked at, how we've been conditioned, and to look at the fact that who were we before we were conditioned? When I was a little baby, what is that light that's shining out of, every baby's eyes? When my children were babies, I would stare for hours into their eyes because there was no label. There was no judgment. There was no knowing of anything. There was just pure presence.
Light of the divine. Light of the divine.
Like sitting in front of the guru. Light of the divine. And sadly, that gets taken away with the conditioning that we process, that we get subjugated and conditioned by. So it's really a dismantling That's why I refer to WD-40. I don't know if you have that when you're...
Of course, what do you mean? Like, right, put WD-40 on everything.
We got to have the psychic WD-40, you know, and to undo these rusty bolts that are holding up our kind of conditioned ego self, who we think we are, who we erroneously think we are. And we need to come back to that pure presence that was there prior to any of that happening.
Beautiful.
And have that within the mantle of our own conscious awareness of who we are as well. And I think this is the shift that we're describing, that we're talking about. And it's very beautiful, and rightfully so, that you bring in the rebalancing of the divine feminine, because we've been living in a predominantly male-dominated society, which has served its purpose. I mean, like the Mayans say that every 5,000 years it shifts from predominantly male to predominantly female. You know, if you go back 5,000, 6,000 years in the archaeological record, in the Minoan civilizations and other civilizations, you find it was all matriarchal. It was all predominantly female, until that went out of balance, because the female has a shadow side as well. And the male side came in to bring the light and to rebalance. And now the male side is coming out of balance. And the divine feminine is casting off the shackles and chains that have been placed upon her by this male dominator consciousness, and is taking her rightful place to redress the imbalance that we've been having in our lives. And this is reflected and is in every aspect of the shift that we're experiencing. As I said, science and mysticism being the more feminine aspect, science being the masculine aspect, you know, inner and outer, as above, so below, as within, so without, and bringing the balance back. It's really, we're out of balance.
Yeah, like the merging.
The merging and the psychosis we've been experiencing is this imbalance.
Yeah.
This and the divine feminine is redressing this imbalance, bringing back values, qualities, and characteristics that we've lost along the way, and that are absolutely necessary in order to heal the sickness of the mind that we've been experiencing collectively. And it is happening. I see evidence of it everywhere. Everywhere I go, I see the birthing. And I guess it's a little bit like those Gestalt pictures. When you see the old woman, but then you look deeper and it's, oh no, it's a young woman. And then no, it's an old woman. You can't see them both at the same time. You're either seeing one or the other. Similarly, people are either seeing what's dissolving and dissolution at the moment, which is very disconcerting and cause for great fear and concern and anxiety, or people are seeing with what's birthing. And I'm encouraging all people I speak with to look at, why be bothered at an old rotten fruit that's falling off the tree? Rather be aware of the new fruit that is being birthed. Why be bothered with this old rotten, maggot-infested piece of fruit? Let it fall down. Let it dissolve as it rightfully should. The heart, the essence of our realm is death and rebirth. It's the masculine and the feminine. It's the lingam and the yoni. It's the divine and the material. And so we need to bring them together to create this stasis, this balance. So it's a rebalancing. And as the harmony is brought back between the sexes, between the masculine and the feminine, so it will be felt in all of the world. This is why you quite rightly point out that there are only men, old, decrepit men who are running this planet. They're all in their 80s and 90s and 100. Kissinger died at 100 years of age. This is the old guard dissolving, dying, and what is emerging now is a new blood, new freshness, and it is coming in the form of the divine feminine. Maybe as an actual woman, but more than that, as the quality of the divine feminine. I'm glad. Each and every one of us.
Yes. Yeah, good. No, I just want to say I'm glad you bring that in, because I love what you're saying around, it's like, it's a state of being, right? It can happen in all of us. It's a merging of that state of being that you've been speaking about today, whether we call it unity consciousness, whether everything we've described, all of that encases the yin, the yang as the wholeness. We're coming into
the wholeness.
We're coming into wholeness. And as we walk as wholeness, that interconnection to all things, and even, I so love it, as we walk in wholeness, it brings in everything you said, which is the unknown, because it's such a paradox. We started in paradox, we end in paradox, we're still in the unknown.
Indeed.
It's all but it's like, It's really dropping into the wholeness of that. And in that wholeness, you don't need to know anything. You're it. You know, it's like, you don't need to, what do you need to know? You don't need to know. You don't need to work it out, fix it, or explain it. As you said, you just vibrate it.
And you don't need a book of rules and regulations, because you will innately know what is the right thing to do, the right action to take, when you're aware of that we're connected to all things.
Yeah.
There will be you won't say, do not kill, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do. 10 commandments are out of date.
Right.
Completely. They serve their purpose for a period of time. But right now, wholeness is its own antidote.
Right.
It is its own kind of like answer, if you like. And it is what will give birth to the golden age of true harmonious coexistence and co-creation on this planet. It will happen. And I know it seems like impossibly to even consider the state of the planet today, but we are moving very rapidly through this birthing canal. And once we become whole, not perfect, but whole, that's the crucial word. Thank you for bringing that into the equation. It's wholeness. We don't have to be perfect. We just need to be whole and embrace our shadow and our light sides. And then once you've taken the charge out of the shadow actually becomes a really beautiful, rich part of our own being.
Yes.
Just as the night has its own poetry and magic,
yes,
as well as the day. And one defines the other in a totality of our experience.
Yeah.
And this is how I see.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And I was saying, I often say now, like, it's not about, because people say dark and light. I've said, no. Dark and light are magical. They're both powerful. We need them both. It's the shadow of the dark, the shadow of the light. Often the shadow of the light is in the blind way more than the shadow of the dark. Sometimes you can see the shadow of the dark and you can go,
that's right.
That's playing out. The shadow of the light is quite, cunning and very sly.
Spiritual ego, for example.
Spiritual ego, exactly. So when we're bringing those in and going, okay, let's bring the illumination to all of that, then we can embrace it, as you so beautifully said. And I'm just going to end us on today. I want you to end with the last few words, but I want to say that, for me, the opportunity to dissect and play, we're playing with the mind, we're playing with the thinking, we're dropping into these different concepts today. But what I love is the play with you, so that we can play in that. We're playing we're presenting it all. And then this, as you said earlier, this non-identification to it allows me to drop back into the unknown, not proclaim that anything is, fixed from what we've shared today. No. While at the same time, the truth will always remain.
Indeed, brother. It's a process. It's not an end result. It's a journey. There is no goal as such. And we can certainly stop and smell the flowers along the way. There's no rushing towards some sort of goal. It is a process. It's a verb, not a noun. We're not arriving at some place. It's an unfolding, evolutionary process that is literally taking us, bootstrapping us into a whole other sense of awareness, which involves embracing our wholeness. And from that wholeness comes the rebalancing. And the rebalancing brings its own, once we are fully aware and we've brought the shadow home, like the prodigal son, owned it, brought it back into ourselves. So it's no longer a reject, no longer charged or with repressed feelings and being projected outwards onto some other person or some other event. But we've owned that. It happens in each and every one of us. It's not something that's happening out there. It's happening in our very soul, in our very being, in the very vehicles that we inhabit whilst we are here in this beautiful planet. And it behooves each and every one of us to, in our own time, in our own way, in our own process, to embrace that, to be willing to embrace that. And that's all that existence asks for. It doesn't ask, are you qualified or not? Do you have the right, characteristics? Or it just says, are you willing to make this shift? And if you go, yes, I'm willing, that's all existence wants. And it will just open the pathway. In a way of not knowing, we have to be comfortable with not knowing. And I always like to, bring this whole idea of, I don't know who the quote came from, that life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived and to be bowed down to. Mm-hmm. So we don't need to know. We need to embrace the wholeness, because that's who we are. Mm-hmm. In essence, we're not separate from that wholeness. And we are the mystery that we bow down to.
Love that. Love that. Yeah, it's so wonderful that I love that you bring in the mystery. I love it. We always we're coming to an end and all these little bombs drop in. I love it because the mystery, the very essence of mystery is a mystery. It can't be known. It's a mystery, right? That's the cosmic joke. The cosmic joke of it all. It's like, hey, you're the mystery.
That's the cosmic joke. Don't explain the mystery. That's not a mystery then, and the poetry, the beauty, the music, the imagination, all stems from the mystery. Yeah. And if you like, you could refer to the unified field or the interconnectedness of all things as the mystery. Yeah. It's like Indra's net. In every unique individual, we contain the entire universe, and it's being reflected in you, which you are an entire universe, and it's being reflected in every other person's planet, and hence Indra's net. We are a number of interconnected universes reflecting each other as one universe. And this is the way it is. All completely interconnected. Indra's net.
Yeah. Indra's net, exactly. And I was just being pulled into just the piece of your music and your sound, and actually the essence of sound itself and the way you work with sound, or what I pick up a little bit from online. And of course I listen to your music, but it's actually taking you into the void of that mystery, that's what sound is also writing, So it's like, that's also, again, it's like we're being welcomed into the void of that soulness, that wholeness.
That void is not nothing. It's pure potential. Yeah. It's the source of all creativity, of all manifestation. You know what David Bohm calls the implicate and the explicate order. That void is everything in pure potential. It's a pregnant state. It's not a nothing. Right. And that's what we truly are. That is the mystery. That is it. Yeah. And we are it.
Boom. Boom. We are
Simon.
We are it. Thank you, my beloved Dar Pan. It's always a pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Likewise.
We will share this. We will share this with the world. You just released something. I'm going to put it on the in the description notes. But you just released another little transmission track with I always say their name right. What?
Liquid Bloom and Parangi.
Parangi.
Two beautiful brothers of mine. It's not really mine. It's a collaboration with the three of us. Yeah. And I've introduced some words to that. And I love those brothers. I'm always happy to work with them. I did a beautiful transmission. I don't know if you know it, called New Generations with Desert Dwellers. Have you come across that?
I don't know, man. I've come across most of them. I got to find that out.
Look it up on YouTube. It's by Desert Dwellers featuring Dar Pan. It's called New Generations.
Is this recent?
So we've done. This is a few years ago.
I must have heard it.
And I've done lots of other ones with Liquid Bloom as well that can be found. So we often collaborate together.
Yeah. I use a lot of yours in my journeys and my dances and.
Well, you like New Generations.
Yeah. I'm gonna check it out. Perfect. Well,
cool.
Well, brother, thank you. Beautiful as always for everyone listening. Thank you for taking this journey with us. Now we're 2 hours journey in, and I really don't take your precious time, although time is part of the illusion. However, I don't take your physical time for granted. So really, I'd love you to let me know how this lands for you, which parts of this conversation really dropped for you, support you, and let us know. We would love to receive your comments. As always, please, wherever you're listening to this on your preferred platform, share a review, a comment. It really helps the podcast to get more traction. I'm not having a big marketing budget or any marketing budget to put these out there. So it's really independently shared. So the more of you that share it with a friend, with your communities, that really supports this to support other souls out there. Underneath here, you can get the links to all of Dar Pan's stuff. Head over to his website and all the relevant places to explore. Really, as always, I'm going to keep saying it. I don't know, maybe to the last moments, but a new vision and metamorphosis. I actually put the transcripts up on my Medium page to digest those transmissions, use them as anchors, as I said at the beginning, to support your own process of awakening, and also any of the other albums that Dar Pan has out there. Anything you want to share, Dar Pan? Anything coming up or anything you want to?
I think you've covered it, Simon, and thank you so much for creating this platform, to bring this information and these kind of ideas into the public arena. I really appreciate your efforts and your service in that way to the evolving, awakening on this planet.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's a great gift to have this time with you, brother, because I know I said it before, but a huge influence to me. So it's always just a great blessing. I remember our first call back in Bali, and it just continues. But listen, for everyone here, you heard it here first. I'm really planning on creating a little journey with Dar Pan and myself, where you come on a little bit more of an intimate journey with us and drink some of this wisdom, and we'll be bringing that to the fore at some point.
A more interactive, yes.
Yeah, a more interactive journey, a more intimate journey with a closed group. So if that also excites you, tell me in the comments, and you will get the info when it comes out. For now, thank you so much to all of you. May you stay blessed wherever you are, and sending you love. And as Dar Pan just said, you are it.
Blessings, brother. Thank you so much, as always.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Simon Transparently. This podcast is a call to action, a call into sovereignty, a call to speak our truth and love ourselves fiercely, and for us all to rise up together as love. If you are resonating with my offerings, you can support me by becoming a patron, for which I would be deeply grateful. And you can access more of my content at simontransparently.com.
This is our time to rise.